Hi there, I'm Mike Willson, an environmental consultant with a specialism in firefighting foam and foam system applications, foam developments, capabilities and environmental impacts. I've been asked by all Technics to make this series of videos which are designed to keep you up to date with the current regulations and issues around firefighting foams. In this longer video, we'll be explaining the pros and cons of switching to fluorine free foams for high hazard sites such as COMA and Cerveso 3 sites, plus offshore installations, where F3s may not provide equivalent fire performance. For anyone unsure, COMA stands for Sites Under the Control of Major Accident Hazards Regulations, which is the UK equivalent of Europe's Cerveso 3 directive, which was named after an Italian town where a tragic and deadly chemical explosion happened in 1976. Major companies are keen to comply with environmental improvements by avoiding the use of potentially damaging chemicals, yet they also need to ensure existing functionality is not being compromised. Whether a site is land-based or at sea, the safety of personnel, firefighters, contractors, visiting pilots and supply vessels is paramount. Fire protection systems also need to protect critical infrastructure, without which production could cease. Major parts of these installations could potentially quickly be lost to fire, and potentially hazardous materials such as chemicals, radiation, gases and oil may be released into the atmosphere and surrounding environment. Consequently, it's important to think carefully about the implications of any transition to fluorine-free foams, particularly in terms of response times, fire performance, reliability, and the specific fuels and systems in use. Also, whether potentially significant costs and likely downtime can be justified from a safety standpoint, ensuring existing life safety protections are not being unintentionally compromised. C6 foams are not currently restricted. If and when new EU regulations come into force, COMA, Cerveso 3 and offshore platforms are expected to have 10 years to make their F3 transition. This EU legislation is expected to come into force probably by late 2025 or 2026, but it's already been delayed. It's important when considering whether to transition to fluorine-free foams or F3s to look at your specific fuel hazards and existing fire protection systems to see whether there is an F3 that may provide an equivalent level of performance as your C6 foam. Once you've selected a fluorine-free foam, you may not be able to top it up with other F3 concentrates following any emergency, which is quite an important consideration for mutual aid groups. Mixing such viscous concentrates could cause adverse reactions in storage, like gelling or clumping. It's also important to recognise when such a transition may be premature, potentially exposing lives and critical infrastructure to greater danger, as equivalent functionality may not yet be achievable. The importance of conducting fire approval testing on the fuels in use, like gasoline, crude oil, condensate, naphtha or other volatile fuels often commonly stored and used offshore and on COMA sites, is important. Many current fire tests use heptane, which often delivers superior and perhaps misleading results compared to gasoline. The effect that wind can have on the effectiveness of fluorine-free foams to form a well-expanded foam blanket that smothers the fire can be significant. Independent testing has shown F3s to be most effective at expansion ratios of typically 7 or 10 to 1, but this may be adversely affected by wind. NFPA Research Foundation also found generally 25 to 50% higher application rates were being required when lower expansions of 3 or 4 to 1 were used, especially on gasoline. This means that more foam may be needed, which in turn could necessitate the replacement of existing tanks with larger storage vessels, extra weight and space, more discharge devices and additional containment areas. Many offshore installations and helidecks rely on fast-acting use of semi-aspirated or non-aspirated foam applications, especially to combat the adverse effects of strong winds. It ensures the foam reaches and controls fires in the target hazard area, which may not be possible with current F3s. Many refineries and probably all offshore installations use seawater in their fire system ring mains. Swedish research from 2022 tested 11 leading fluorine-free foams, finding that seawater negatively impacts fire test performance in almost all of them, increasing the rate of foam collapse, which reduces functionality. We also shouldn't ignore the substantial costs and potential shutdown implications of platforms for several days, if not weeks, while necessary design changes are implemented, clean-outs and residual PFAS testing conducted, and commissioning. Due to weight and space saving requirements offshore, foams are usually standardised on 1% concentrates, with a -18°C proportioning accuracy approval required. This ensures year-round system functionality. F3 foams tend to be more viscous, so different proportioning systems may be required. In some cases, proportioning accuracy under winter or hot summer conditions may not be reliable, potentially jeopardising a system's fire response. Given this multiplicity of factors, it may make more sense in terms of safety, operations and economics to remain with C6 foams until fluorine-free foams can match their performance characteristics. Waiting until future legislation and transition periods enter into force may be the most cost-effective and prudent option right now. If you have any questions or want to discuss your particular site requirements or situation in more detail, please do get in touch via info@firefightingfoam.com. Thanks for watching.